Welcome back to episode 70 of In the Shadow of the Evening Trees. I'm Jen Von Ebers.
I'm Dave Von Ebers.
And welcome back to what is going to be a spicy episode.
Welcome back. It's 70 episodes.
Yes.
So this is kind of our Festivus episode because we got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it.
Yes.
That's not with you people.
Yes.
With other
with
people.
Other people that I'm sure you are also feeling the same way we are. So this episode is going to be dedicated to what has happened and transpired from the first week of President Trump being sworn back into presidency. And it's a lot, and it's disturbing, and it is horrible.
Our cat Gordy's upset about it,
yes.
as you can plainly hear.
Yeah, so we just wanted to share what we were feeling and just start the conversation because we know a lot of you are feeling the same way we are, and it's just kind of like unfathomable that we have to deal with this for the next 4 years.
Yep. That is such
Serenity now.
Serenity now.
That's what we've been saying every day.
We've got nothing but Seinfeld references.
Yes.
Although Seinfeld references and Clash songs. I was in a meeting at work, and people had their cameras on. And in my office, I have a very small office, and it's also kind of like the only place, pardon me, I can keep my guitars. So there's a guitar behind me, and one of the women on the call, we were kind of like at the end of the conversation, and one of the women on the call said, well, if no one has anything else to talk about, you could play us a song. And first I said, no, you don't want me to do that. And then I said, the only thing I play nowadays is Clash songs. And we all sort of had like this sort of grim laugh about that. And then the meeting ended.
And we're out.
And we're done. Pardon my coughing. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, so I mean, just from the get-go, I think the first thing that we, during the inauguration thing, that was Jeff Bezos's girlfriend doing a Sue Ellen Mishke.
Sue Ellen Mishke. I literally I took a
yes.
picture and texted you that.
Yes, and it's like, you know that's a bra, right?
Sue Ellen. It's not a top.
So that's funny, just because it's just like, what the hell, kind of thing.
And I don't like criticize the way people dress generally because I don't care. They're adults. They can do whatever they want. But it just struck me as a kind of
She knew what she was doing.
She knew what she was doing. It was really a pretty, like a weird thing to do in that circumstance.
Yes. Very bold.
And it was bold, but it was also sort of clueless,
yes.
I think, but then again, the whole thing was a 3-ring circus, so it doesn't surprise me. He's such a wimp. Trump is such a wimp, he couldn't go outdoors in 20 degrees. We walked this morning in colder weather
yes,
than
we
that.
Did.
But anyway.
So
that's the least of our
that's
problems.
The least. But
Trump's wimpiness is the least of our problems.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, let's just talk about the biggest one, which is affecting our daughter and everybody in the transgender community, of just basically saying that there should be no transgender people,
right.
And there's only 2 genders. So that was just like, what the hell? And the Caitlyn Jenner, who is a Trump supporter and still is, and said everything was like, congratulations and all this stuff, and everyone in the comments is just like, that he just said you don't exist, and right. You're still supporting this person.
But I have to say one thing, though. You're absolutely right about that, but I have to say one thing that annoyed me to no end was how many liberals and leftists were dead-naming her in the comments.
That is true.
Look, Trump is a major league jackass, and so is Caitlyn Jenner. But you don't dead name people, trans people, non-binary people, anybody, because that affects other people. Caitlyn Jenner doesn't give a damn. You could say whatever you want about her. She doesn't care. But other people in the trans and non-binary community do care, and
yes.
It affects them. So don't do that kind of thing, no matter how much you hate Trump or her. Sorry, I just had to go off on that.
No,
because
it's
I couldn't
so
believe how frequently I saw it. And then people started to push back a little bit and said, look, there's no need for that. We know she's a hypocrite. We know she's a jerk. Dead naming her doesn't change that.
For sure.
So just, don't behave that way just because you're mad Anyway, Trump has a way of bringing out the worst in people. So apparently, I'm gonna chalk it up to that.
Yes. But it is, just there's just so many things about this week that have just been eye-opening to think. Not that we don't know that half of America feels like this, which is also sad, that you can have people who are support him so strongly and are just behind him so fiercely and think that he can make a decision. They don't even know all the stuff that he's doing or the ramifications that'll come from it. We won't know that until it continues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing. It's like, and somebody had started an Instagram for the next year is gonna share the price of eggs.
Yeah, right.
Just to let's just see what happens. A year from now, what's the trend gonna be?
It's sort of the reverse of the Liz Truss head of lettuce in the UK, where somebody posted a head of lettuce with sunglasses and said, "This head of lettuce will last longer than her term as prime minister." And it did.
It did.
Actually. They just had it sitting on their counter
story.
so the price of eggs is sort of the flip side of that, is how badly will he mess things up and cause, unnecessary costs. And and it's like, first of all, they planned this out, that the whole idea was to come in and cause as much chaos as possible, and also doing everything they could, in a way like as cruelly as possible.
Yes.
Like the whole thing with trying to declare that transgender people don't exist. They also, are revoking all kinds of things that Joe Biden did, and the various cabinet departments under Joe Biden to protect the rights of LGBTQ plus people. And it's stunning, of course, how many private organizations are just like bowing down to him.
Mm-hmm.
He revoked an executive order that Lyndon Johnson signed in 1965 to try to encourage federal agencies to be more diverse and to contract with more diverse parties. And in some ways, that was kind of the beginning of affirmative action, DEI, and that sort of thing. And the whole idea was, you pass a law that says you can't discriminate, but that's not like waving a magic wand and ending all discrimination. Correct. And making sure people have equal opportunity. You still have to do the work to implement that. And it's, Lyndon Johnson had many flaws, one of which was escalating the Vietnam War. But when it came to domestic policy, when a white Southerner is telling you it's not enough just to pass a law, but you actually have to take affirmative steps to make sure people have equal opportunity, that says something. And then you get a rich guy who lived in a golden penthouse on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan coming along and saying, no, we're going to undo that thing that the white Southern guy understood in the sort of post-segregation era. It's just, it's just mind-blowing.
So that is upsetting too, because that affects so many people and so many jobs and people trying to just, and that's the whole thing that I think is insane, is like, he's white. Yes. And he wants everything in the world to be white, so the racism is just so extreme and so just horrible. And not only, to remove all Spanish stuff out of the White House.
What the hell?
And then it's like, oh, it's temporary. They're rebuilding the website. No, you purposely took that down so people don't have access to it. Yeah. And also on Instagram and TikTok and X, all the Spanish forms of communication on the White House webpage removed.
It's just a giant middle finger to Hispanic people generally, but especially, I think, to Hispanic people who supported him. He's telling folks who aren't, straight, white, of European descent, you don't belong, or you're less than. Yes. And he's telling Latino voters who voted for him that they're less than. And there's a lot of things on social media where people are kind of like, well, you're getting what you deserve. Hey, you know what? Nobody deserves this. Even if they made a terrible choice at the polling place, nobody deserves this. Hispanic people, regardless of who they voted for, don't deserve to be treated as second-class citizens. You know, no one deserves it.
No.
And we have to sort of maintain our moral focus in fighting back against this, because if you start saying, well, gee, it's your fault because you voted for him, you know, even if you think that's true, you still have to say, yeah, but nobody deserves that. A Hispanic adult who voted for Trump may have children who are going to be adversely affected by this. And
Exactly.
They count too.
And that's the thing. It's like to put the fear of what is going to happen to your life, and not only for this community too, but for people who, you know, the executive order for people who work for the government, everyone has to come in the office starting in March, you know, kind of thing. And people who are hired as a remote worker doesn't count. You have to come in the office. They don't even work near any there. People have already got their lives established and things like that. And now you're just going to create more traffic, more, you know, there's not room for everybody, you know, all sorts of things. And eliminating so many positions already. It's like you said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create all these jobs, and immediately you take away jobs, you know, the second that you get in there. So that's all, part of me is just like for the people who, and we have family, extended family on my side that are in that camp and support Trump. And it's
probably
kind
on
of
my side too, by the way.
So that's also disheartening too, because you don't want to get in a fight with people in your family, you know, necessarily, but it's almost like, how could we be in the same family and think so differently, you know, kind of thing, which is insane.
Right, and I think, I mean, we're kind of going all over the place here, as we often do, and that's fine.
My mind's a scramble.
Yeah, well, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be right now.
Right.
But I think, you know, there's all this, around the holidays, well, it even began, you know, pre-Thanksgiving, obviously, because the election was before that. There are a lot of people saying, well, you should cut off family members who voted for Trump. And that may be true in some cases, but just, you know, cutting people off and ignoring them is also a way of avoiding the problem. And I think maybe it would make more sense, to the extent it's possible, if you have the mental capacity for it, you know, if you could do it, is actually reach out to those people and not to make nice, not to excuse what they did, but confront them. I mean, you don't have to confront them in an angry way. You don't have to yell and scream at them. Well, some of them might deserve it, but no, I'm kidding. But you know, especially we white folks, to be blunt, you know, to just say, well, I made the right decision, so I can ignore all the people who made the wrong decision. That's not going to move us forward. To some degree, we have to figure out how to confront other white folks, again, to be blunt, not to make everything an issue of race, but white people overwhelmingly voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Okay? That's true. You can point your fingers at other people and other groups, but white people are primarily responsible for this. And we can't just keep ignoring the fact that our demographic groups, whether it's by race, age, gender, as a man, you know, most men voted for Trump, or most male voters did anyway. You know, we have to figure out how to get the point across to people in our groups that you screwed up, man. You screwed up. You know, I know it sounds condescending. It sounds like you're talking down to people, but when is this going to change? It has to change at some point. We can't keep throwing our country away because our feelings are hurt. Oh, you know, women have too many jobs. They have too many opportunities. Black people are having opportunities. There's too many people speaking Spanish. It's all this, you know, emotion, instead of just what's the best thing you can do for our country and our neighbors and our family members. You know, those are the things that matter, not your hurt feelings.
Yeah. And I think that that's the biggest problem I have, is like for people who believe the things that are behind him, it's just sad, basically.
And that's kind of the elephant in the room, is, you know, people, and we've talked about this before, so I sound like a broken record, but, you know, it was a very close election. So I understand a lot of the sort of post-mortem analysis where people say, well, the Democrats should have done this, Harris should have done that, Biden should have done this. Maybe so. Maybe any one of those little things, since it was such a close election, any one of those little things might have made a difference. Maybe you could have turned things around in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or something like that. But the elephant in the room still is there's a very large percentage of our fellow Americans who like Donald Trump because of the worst things about him.
Yes.
Right? And
greed.
Whatever you think about Biden's support for Israel, or maybe not being progressive enough on labor issues, or not doing enough to, advance whatever progressive policies you support. Whatever you think about those things weren't going to persuade the racists and the homophobes and the bigots in that group of voters, right? Some things might have, but there's a group of people who you're not going to reach through policy or through messaging or whatever it is, because they like Trump. And I'm not talking about people who maybe are naive or foolish or whatever. I'm talking about people who understand what Trump stands for and who he is, and they like it.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, to have somebody who's the president of the United States, you'd think that you would want somebody who has a lot of good characters about them. And so for people to just put aside that he's a cheater, he's cheated people on money and deals and bankrupted people, bankrupted companies, greedy. All those things add up, and it's just like, that's just put to the side. And it's like, but he's a businessman. He's gonna turn things around.
Right. Subject to multiple accusations
Yes.
of rape and sexual assault.
Yep.
A civil jury found him liable for sexual assault. He was found liable for fraud in New York State. All of these things. I remember when Bill Clinton had the audacity to have an affair with a 21-year-old staff member, which, let's face it, was gross. I'm not defending that.
Yeah.
It was gross. But I was told character counts. All of my Republican friends and all of the people in the early days of, blogs and stuff like that, everyone on the internet, on Al Gore's internet,
Right.
was saying character counts. But apparently it doesn't count, because you can have a Secretary of Defense who is an admitted serious alcoholic. Who now and again, look, alcoholism is a disease, but he seems to be boastful about how much he drinks. Mm-hmm. It's not like he's getting help. He knows he has a problem, and he's actually okay with the problem.
Right.
There are all kinds of accusations of him being abusive. He's made all kinds of public statements about he does not respect women in the military, and he's going to be the Secretary of Defense. What the heck, man? We were talking on Christmas Eve about how my dad had headed over into World War II on Christmas Eve, 1944. My mother would have given anything to be able to be in the active duty military. She dreamed of being a pilot. She wanted to be in the Air Force, but of course it wasn't an option for women in
those days.
in those days. But she worked at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. During the war and stuff like that. But anyway, to disrespect women in the military, or anyone in the military, is just, is totally unacceptable.
One of the bright spots, I thought, was the Bishop Marianne Budde, who did the prayer service. And, I listened to that probably 5 times, and it was very powerful. If you missed it, go watch it. And basically what she said is, just have mercy. If you can have anything else, he won't, and everything. And he was offended by that. Yeah. But it's like, what you are doing here has caused harm and fear for a lot of people. And, to have the courage to say that to his face, amazing. And then to also, since then, she's gotten death threats, right. And, things like that. It's like, for telling somebody to have mercy, that's somebody who should be, killed because of that. It's like, no, she told the truth about what, he should be doing. So I give kudos to her.
Yeah, and that's, I think, too, another example of kind of what I was saying before about how, that's confronting people, not in angry.
She wasn't shouting.
She wasn't shouting. She wasn't angry, but she confronted powerful people and spoke her mind and spoke the truth. And the negative reaction that you see kind of confirms what I said earlier about
Yes.
there's a part of our society that really likes all the negativity of Donald Trump and cannot handle someone coming to them from the point of view of just common decency. But we are decent people, and I think probably the people listening to us are decent people.
Yes.
And our family members are, and our friends are. And so, it's on us to be the ones to speak up. Not everyone can do it. I'm terrible at it. I'm really bad at trying to speak rationally, but also from a moral point of view. Like, I get angry. And social media is partially to blame for that because, you enter into this sort of alternate universe where people's behavior is like totally ridiculous.
Yes,
and
off the charts.
Off the charts. And you can get into that mentality without like really realizing you're kind of going down this bad road. So I'm terrible at it. I have to learn how to figure out how to do it. But I think we have to do it. I think part of our challenge is we have to talk to people who are like us, if you're white, and especially if you're white and male, and you have to say some of these things. Our cat
just jumped off the dresser.
Jumped off the dresser and knocked a fork on the floor. You know what you say when you drop a fork?
What?
Company's coming. Someone's coming for dinner.
Someone's coming for dinner.
I don't know whether it was an Irish thing or not, but my mother would always say that.
That's so
funny. Drop the fork. Company's coming.
That was my fork, actually. I left it in here the other day.
I know, because we're in your office.
So yeah, I think, and the other thing we had talked about before, which I think is more important than ever, is keeping some positivity in your life.
Yes.
I mean, we were bombarded this week with like day after day after day, like what now? What happened now? And things like that. And so for us, obviously between us, we talk about it. So there's, having somebody in your life that you can talk about these grievances with. If you can do it online, that's good. If you can meet people, get out and get fresh air. We did walking club today. So we walked with people in our community today. Beautiful weather and just getting into nature and things like that, just to take your mind off of it a little bit, because this is going to be overwhelming for the next 4 years. It just is.
Yeah.
And we just don't know what's going to happen. And, for Trump to say like, oh, I'm going to insert these tariffs. And then Canada's like, we're going to turn off lights, kind of thing. It's just like, you want to do this? We're going to do this. So I think that's the other thing that is his wanting to be such a dominant a dictator, basically, and thinking that, and if you would just ask him a question, and I said this to David before, which we should, that if they did it through the debates, if you were to ask Trump a multiple choice question, can the president do this, and just do A, B, C, and D, he would get it wrong, because he'd think he can do everything by himself without asking anybody and doing anything. And so he feels like he can just do anything and have no retaliation. And then these other countries are not dumb. They're not, they have power too. And to think that all of a sudden that you are going to create so much wealth that comes into the country that it's just going to be insane and without any ramification, and everyone bowing down and say, of course. And then he gets his way, and then it's like a happy ending. And it's like, I'm so sorry, that's not going to happen.
Right, and a big part of his thing with the tariffs is thinking that somehow or another it can effectively replace the income tax. So obviously what he's angling to do is, cut taxes further for his wealthy friends.
For sure.
And we've been through this. Obviously, went through this with Trump before. And of course, what happened? Middle class taxes went up, not down. But the same thing happened during the Reagan administration. Reagan came in making all kinds of promises about cutting taxes, and the deficit blew up, and the national debt blew up. And so he ended up having to raise taxes.
Because where are you going to get the money from?
Right, exactly. But the difference is, as bad as Reagan was, he still fundamentally believed in the job of government. And the problem with Trump is he doesn't, because he doesn't care. It was really amazing to see him making this weird, rambling conversation about or having this weird rambling conversation about California, and he was talking about getting rid of FEMA because the individual states and individual cities ought to be able to handle crises, natural disasters and so forth. And he's talking about it just requires good government. And it was just like the dissonance between what he actually stands for. You're talking before cutting all these government jobs and talking about getting rid of FEMA, but he somehow thinks that good government is going to solve the problems. Well, good government requires people. It requires money. It requires
expertise.
Yeah, it requires making some decisions that aren't purely political. Compromising with the other side because someone comes up with a good idea and they might happen to have a D next to their name instead of an R. But if it's a good idea and it works, you still do it.
Right.
He's not going to do any of that. Mm-mm. He's not going to do any of that. So that's bizarre.
Yeah. Then the other elephant in the room, which is a big one, is Elon Musk.
Oh my God.
Why he's Trump's best friend, so that's why he's close to the everything. But the Nazi salute, and then people forgiving him for saying, oh, of course not, that's not it. And then it's like, yes, it was.
Yeah, and there was a time, maybe it's not true anymore, there was a time when if you defended a ridiculous thing in a ridiculous way, you looked ridiculous, right? I mean, remember how they impeached Bill Clinton over the way he parsed his words, and he said that he didn't have sex with Monica Lewinsky because in the lawsuit they had defined, the Paula Jones lawsuit, they defined sexual relations to mean a specific thing. And what Clinton was saying is what he did with Monica Lewinsky didn't actually fit that definition. So he was parsing his words really carefully, and he, famously said in a deposition, depends on what the meaning of is, or whatever. And they crucified him over that. But they're doing exactly that with Elon Musk. We all know what we saw. It wasn't just an incidental, raising his hand. The entire gesture, from putting his hand on his heart to raising his hand the way he did
abruptly,
was mimicking what Hitler would do in public appearances. And there's, lots of little video clips out there of Hitler doing the same thing. If you raise your hand up, it could mean all kinds of things. If you do exactly what Hitler did by putting your hand over your heart and then shooting your forearm up like that, it very clearly is meant to be a Nazi salute. And of course he was messing with people. Of course he was. You know why? Because he's a dick.
Right.
He's a dick. And he was acting like a dick. And this is an explicit show.
It is now.
So I just want to clarify that.
Adults only.
Adults only. It's like Wayne's World After Dark.
Yes.
But that's like the mentality of all these guys that Trump surrounds him with. And, he did it in order to generate the controversy that he generated. And then he's such a wimp, because all these guys ultimately are wimps. They are. Mm-hmm. He's such a wimp that he couldn't just, laugh it off. He couldn't just say, oh, I was just trying to get under your skin. He had to come up with all kinds of excuses, because he doesn't have the backbone to he wants to act like a dick, but he doesn't have the backbone to defend his dickishness.
And for the people who said, oh, that wasn't what he did at all, I saw so many people that says, then do that at your job.
Yeah,
do that
exactly.
for your friends. Do that when you're at church.
Right.
Do that and see what kind of reaction you get, and I'm pretty sure you're going to get the same reaction that we all had when he did that. So yeah, it's just a farce of nonsense.
And then there's the defense of, oh well, he's autistic, and I've heard that before. Some people seem to think that's a new line of defense. No, I've heard people say that before, that he's autistic. So maybe he is, and maybe that does explain some of his kind of quirky behavior. But But this feels an awful lot like scapegoating autistic people.
Yes.
I don't know of any instance that anybody can point to of someone who's autistic, but that makes them do a Nazi salute
exactly. Or
be,
not know what that means.
Right, or not know what it means, or be racist or anything like that.
Yes.
It's the same way they scapegoat mentally ill people every time there's a mass shooting. And people on the left do this too, frankly, and it just, it's extremely annoying. But, we need to do something about mental illness. Well, okay, first of all, what are you going to do about it? Stop talking about it and do something.
Right.
Help people, because since Reagan, everything is Reagan's fault, by the way. I just want to clarify that.
Starting then.
Starting then, exactly right. But, since Reagan, the federal government has been, they've slashed funding for mental health and everything like that. Reagan closed a lot of facilities that, basically just put people out on the streets who had mental health issues. So I don't want to hear anyone, especially from the right, talking about mental health issues when they're not doing anything or offering solutions. But of course, more than that, mental illness has very little to do with violent behavior. Mentally ill people are much more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of violence. But people will always use, that's a reflexive thing. Some kid shoots up a school, or somebody goes into a grocery store and shoots a bunch of people. Oh, they were mentally ill. Mental illness doesn't cause people to be violent, and it certainly doesn't cause people to be, racist, like Dylan Roof, who shot up the black church, or these people who've shot up synagogues, and there was
the Highland Park Parade.
Yeah, the Highland Park Parade, the Sikh temple in Wisconsin,
right?
Wasn't it? Anyway, all those incidents, people would immediately point to mental illness. I feel like it's the same thing when people say, oh, he did that because he's autistic. No, you're scapegoating people who have a real condition that makes their lives challenging, and most of them are doing amazing things to deal with it.
Right.
And you're saying that is his excuse. No, it isn't. You're trying to make autism an excuse for anything that Elon Musk does, but you're not going to lift a finger to help people who are actually autistic and have real life struggles and are doing the best they can.
Right. So that is another angst of mine, of just seeing those two together and how close that Elon, and then forming a company right off the bat, talking about artificial or AI and all these things and all the money that's going to happen and jobs that are going to be created because of that. And it's just like, but who do you own that company? Who owns that company? I don't even know.
Well, and that's the other thing. You talk about creating companies. Trump is talking about, he trying to figure out a way to salvage TikTok, which of course we talked about last week. And as I predicted, he's trying to position himself as the hero and the savior of TikTok. And one of the things he's talking about is the U.S. government owning like a 50% stake. That makes it like state media. Right? Like that's what the Soviet Union did with TASS, the official Soviet news outlet. The last thing in the world you need is to have the federal government or government at any level owning a platform where people exercise free speech. It's the total opposite of free speech. They have a BBC in the United Kingdom. They have a CBC in Canada. We do not have the equivalent in the United States. NPR is not the equivalent. PBS is not the equivalent. Those are private entities. They receive some government funding, but they're private entities, and the government owns no part of PBS or NPR. The last thing in the world we want in America is a government-owned social media company.
And nobody's asking for that.
And no one is asking for that.
Yeah,
Literally
it's not like
no
we're
one
saying, can the United States save TikTok? No, we're not saying that at all.
Remember when all these people were all up in arms over Twitter banning Donald Trump and claiming that it was a First Amendment violation, even though Twitter was a private company and the First Amendment doesn't apply to a private company.
Right.
So none of that made any sense. And this guy, Matt Taibbi, who, as far as I know, his only actual skill as a journalist is that he curses a lot. Now, I'm all for cursing a lot, so don't get me wrong. But he's kind of like not that smart. but he, went on this rampage and, about all the attempts of the Democratic Party to like influence Twitter and so forth and so on. And by the way, I don't think any political party, especially the one in power, because he was talking about, what happened after the 2020 election when Biden was in office. Okay. So, I don't think I don't think political parties, the government should try to be influencing what happens on social media. So there may have been something to some of his complaints, but all those folks are weirdly silent now that Trump is talking about taking over half of TikTok, now that X is censoring people left and right.
Removing comments.
Yeah, and that's happening on Facebook and Instagram too. All of a sudden, as the old saying goes, it's okay when a Republican does it, right?
Well,
it's
and
okay if you're a Republican.
The funny thing about TikTok is, so it was down for like 12 hours, 14 hours. It came back up on Sunday, the day before he was inaugurated, and it said, "Thank you, President Trump, for bringing it back." It's like, he's not even president yet.
Right.
He had no power at all. He's a citizen, and he had nothing to do with it and everything. So that whole timing of everything, and that's all planned,
Yeah. And I still go back to it still doesn't make sense to me for the government to ban a social media company, especially when we don't have meaningful data privacy laws in the United States. That would be a much more important thing to do, I think, than trying to ban TikTok or whatever. So I stand by those comments, but my voice is cracking because I'm so upset. But it's second puberty, I guess. But the whole posturing and the way TikTok was, licking his boots and all that stuff is just gross. I mean, it's just gross, and it's as predictable as can be.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be a very long 4 years. We're going to have a lot more to say about this as the weeks go on. So, but we would love to hear what you guys have.
I do want to go back to one thing.
Yes.
Which is that we talked about the end of the show. This question last time, the question about whether the Equal Rights Amendment is now part of the United States Constitution, and unfortunately, it doesn't really look that good. So I actually did some reading on the subject. So there's a couple of things. Number one is that when Congress initially passed, the process of adopting a new amendment is, usually anyway, there's probably more than one way to do it, but the main way is, Congress will pass it first and then it goes to the states for ratification. So in the legislation that Congress passed to adopt the 28th, well, that wasn't necessarily the 28th Amendment because they didn't know when it would be ratified. But in the legislation to adopt the Equal Rights Amendment, they put first, I think it was a 7-year time limit. So they passed the bill in 72, so it would have expired in 77. Then it was extended for 3 years to 82. I think that's right. In any event, that's part of the problem. Although there's a bunch of law professors who say Congress didn't have the authority to impose a time limit. All they could do is pass it and send it off to the states, and if the states ratified it, it becomes part of the Constitution. If they don't, they don't. So there's an argument there, and that's what Lawrence Tribe was saying, and I've seen other constitutional law experts say, that the time limit doesn't matter because Congress didn't have the authority to do it. But there's a couple of other problems. One of which is that the president really didn't have any role in blessing a constitutional amendment. It's the archivist of the United States who has to certify it and publish it. And that's kind of a ministerial act, but that's when it's considered to be part of the Constitution. That's when the effective date is. And so Joe Biden saying, I believe I'm going to sign an executive order that says I think it's part of the Constitution, doesn't have the effect of making it part of the Constitution. The archivist still has to take steps. Biden didn't order the archivist to do that. But even more importantly, and I didn't know this, the archivist has already said that they do not consider it to be part of the Constitution. The 38th state to ratify it was Virginia. That happened in 2020.
And is that how many states need to?
Yeah, three quarters of 50, so
Yeah.
37 and a half, essentially 38, right? So Virginia was the 38th state. But the archivist said because the time limit lapsed, they still think the time limit is effective. So they don't consider it part of the Constitution. They're not going to certify or publish it. They also are relying on a DOJ legal memo that supports that position. But even more, and I gotta give credit to Amani Gandhi, who is a lawyer I've known for many, many years, who's on social media and so forth. She pointed out, and I verified, that 5 of the states that ratified the Equal Rights Amendment rescinded their ratification. And that, by the way, all happened in the 70s. So even by the time the deadline expired, everyone said, well, there were 35 states. Actually, there were 35 that ratified it, but 5 that rescinded ratification. So, all of this is really kind of up in the air. Because can a state ratify and then rescind it? I don't know. I can't really think of a reason why they couldn't, but I'm not a constitutional law expert. So in any event, it's up in the air. It doesn't look good. A new archivist would have to come in and say, or the current archivist would have, is that the right way?
I don't think that's what you say.
Would have to change their mind or whatever. But the other thing is, and this is why I think people kind of rightly criticize Joe Biden, is that if he really thought this was part of the Constitution, he should have said that on day one, not on his way out the door, because there's no way for the federal government. The federal government now is not going to defend it in court. Like if, say, a Republican attorney general files a lawsuit to get the court to say that it's not part of the Constitution, because they say, well, if it is part of the Constitution, it's going to impose all kinds of new burdens on my state. So I'm going to sue to have it declared not part of the Constitution. Ordinarily, if the administration takes the position that it is part of the Constitution, the Solicitor General's office would go to court and defend it. Well, that's not going to happen under Trump.
No.
So, whatever. There's really nothing that the federal government is going to do, at least not the executive branch, to enforce the Equal Rights Amendment. So it's, it doesn't look good.
No, and that's unfortunate.
It is, and it's dumb. But again, rather than kind of doing it for show on his last day or his second to last day, it would have been nice if he had done it on day one, and then we'd have this, we'd have had time to kind of sort all this stuff out. Now that Trump's in office, I don't expect that to happen.
No.
So that is all.
So it's been a very emotional week for everybody.
Yeah.
And we feel you, and we know that there's a lot of people who feel the same way we do, and we invite you to leave a comment. You can leave us a direct message on our Instagram at Jen and Dave. You can visit our website, intheshadowoftheeveningtrees.com. Leave a comment there. So yeah, many ways to reach out to us, and let's just keep the conversation going. And yeah.
And one last thing, Monday, January 27th, is Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Yes.
And I believe it is the 20th year. I think the first Holocaust Remembrance Day was, I wouldn't say celebrated, but
recognized.
recognized in 2005. But in any event, the thing with Elon doing the Nazi salute and all that, just got me thinking a lot about, again, we had talked about my dad going into service 80 years ago, or going into the war 80 years ago. And while he was not in the, forces that liberated the camps, it's also going to be the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the death camps in the coming months. And I thought a lot about how, my dad was just an ordinary guy who said, I'm going to enlist in the army because Hitler's horrible and I have to go fight him. And I think that in times of crisis, there's always ordinary people who will step up and do the right thing.
For sure.
And that's who we have to be now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but that's who we have to be now. We have to be the ordinary people who step up. So that's, you know, with Holocaust Remembrance Day coming up on Monday, that's what the thought I would leave you with. Be that person.
All right. And thank you for listening today to this episode 70. And we will talk to you next time.